Tell me what you think. Aperture priority or shutter priority, compact flash or SD cards. Go. Hey everyone, welcome to Keep Shooting Monday number 117. My name is Greg Cazillo from Cazillo.com. So this week I finally got around to get my Epson 7800 printer installed on my new Windows 10 machine. I had tried before Christmas when I actually built the computer, but I couldn't get it to install because the driver had some problems, and I think it was Friday of last week. I had a little bit of extra time, or maybe it was Saturday. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I finally said, okay, I'm gonna lick this. I'm gonna figure it out. So I did some research. I found out what the error was, what the problems were. Called Epson support. Unfortunately, they couldn't help me. I emailed my contacts at Epson what my final resolution was, and basically the bottom line is that 64-bit machines, in order to keep them more stable, Windows, and I believe Mac does some form of this also, they do something called driver signing, basically saying that this driver is certified to work on a Windows machine by Microsoft, and so you know for sure that that driver has no problems. Well, it works fine for older machines. The driver worked perfectly fine on my Windows 7 machine. I never tried it on a Windows 8 box, but I know for a fact that it worked great on my Windows 7, and it worked fine on my old XP machine from way back when. But the driver hasn't been updated since, I think it was said 2008 or 2009. Obviously, Windows 10 wasn't even thought about that, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So that driver has not been updated. Hopefully they will get it updated now that I've let them know what the problem is. What I ended up doing is actually restarting the computer in a special mode. I'll put a link up on exactly how to do that. Then install the driver. It allowed me to finish installing that without giving me the error, and it prints and runs just fine. I've had no issues. The prints look beautiful, no problems. Actually, for the last couple months though, I've had to print from the Mac because at least that one was working, but now I can print from the PC, which allows me to complete my workflow and makes things a lot easier. So I'll put up a link if anyone has that issue in the future with those kind of printer drivers and Windows 10. So another thing that I was working on this week is doing some panoramic images. I can't show the actual image that I was working on, but I did this quick photo here in the studio, here in the office, and just to show you what something quick and down and dirty can look like. I just shot 5 or 6 photos with my iPhone and said, here, Lightroom, threw it at it and said, here, what can you do? And I was surprised at how good it is. There are some issues, like in the chair spot, there's kind of a problem. It's a little weird. But it would, even if you had to do a little bit of additional work to make it perfect, this really gives you a head start. You could take this image, open the DNG file in Photoshop, fix those couple of final problems, and be done and out of the way. Pleasantly surprised at how good it is, and it actually quite happy with it. And for the other project that I was doing, saved me a ton of time. I actually tried it because I started off in Photoshop. I was going to do it manually in Photoshop, and now that I'm starting to think about it and talk through this, maybe I should have just tried the Photoshop stitching one, but I never thought about it. Anyway, the file was huge. It was actually giving me errors because the file was more than 2 gigabytes because I had to put like 25 images inside of this file in order to stitch it properly. And so it was going to be a really, really big file with a lot of layers and a lot of problems. So bottom line, ended up going over to Lightroom, worked out, and the client was quite happy with the end result. And I was happy because it was nice and sharp, and so there's plenty of resolution for this really big print that I needed. So worked out really good. Speaking of printer issues, the Canon Pro, a little bit of news, the new Canon Pro-1000 printer has an issue. If your serial number starts with AEGL, it can actually leak ink through the bottom. I'm guessing there's some kind of hole or a port, maybe in the waste ink tank area, something like that. I don't know the details, Basically, if it starts with AEGL, contact Canon and they will give you a replacement unit. So that basically they're recalling that. So be careful of that. Maybe put something underneath it so that there's no ink leakage. So if you do have one in the meantime until you get it replaced, because the last thing you want to do is ruin a tabletop or a carpet or floor or something like that because it is leaking. Great article from DIY Photography on curves, telling you exactly how to use it, what to do, how to. Great article. Tells you, it shows you, or some of the things you can do with curves. Let me talk about that first. And the problem is that not many people use curves at all. They'll go with levels, they'll go with your brightness, contrast in Photoshop, but they'll stay away from the curves. Even inside of Lightroom, a lot of people don't use the curves, but curves can really do a lot of work very quickly and do exactly what you need versus some of the other, just the sliders that are in there. So try and check that, read this article definitely. Some of the stuff you can do with curves, you can add contrast in certain areas of a photo. You can remove a color cast from the entire image. You can adjust only a single color. You can adjust skin tones. You can split tone images. Really is a powerful tool. You should, if you do any kind of serious Photoshop work or you do a lot of editing inside of Lightroom, you really need to learn how to use curves because it is totally worth it. So check that out. I think that's it on the news side and the stuff that's going on with me side. I have some other fun stuff that's coming up, some DIY projects. I also have, I started writing the next two series of a PHOTOCADEMY series. Started working on the scanning series with Silverfast. I'm going to be doing a whole series of tutorials on Silverfast and how to use it. And I have another one that I'm working on, which is calibration. I'm going to show you how to calibrate your screens, how to calibrate your printers, how to calibrate your scanner, and also how to use either a color checker chart or something along those lines when you're actually out shooting photo or video, and then how to apply that once you get back into the studio and start actually editing that footage or those photos. So basically give you accurate color throughout your entire process, and you won't have any problems. So all that stuff is coming up very soon. So let's get into a couple of Cazillion questions. D Cosmic asks, hey, is $200 for a used Nikon D3100 a good deal? Well, it depends. Personally, I'm not a fan of any of the lower end bodies from Canon or Nikon for a couple different reasons. I really only know the Nikon bodies best. I haven't used Canons a whole lot. But as far as the Nikons are concerned, the 3000 series and the 5000 series bodies are just very, very simple. They don't have a lot of external buttons, and I feel it makes them harder to use because your entry-level people then have to dig through the menu and they don't understand the menu structure. Whereas if you go with the 7000 series or higher bodies, they have more external buttons, making it easier to find the simple things like your aperture changing and your ISO and the things that really matter. Especially since I preach not to use auto ISO, especially when I'm out teaching new photographers. Super important. Is it a good deal for that body? Sure, as long as it's in good condition, doesn't have a ton of frames on it. Yeah, absolutely, it's a good deal. Has a good battery. It looks clean. It's not beat up. If it includes a lens, then that's even better. But try to look at some of the higher end bodies, even if it's an older 7000. It's probably going to do a D7000. Probably going to do better as far as quality and be overall. You're going to be more happy with it rather than the super low end 3100. Jim What asks, CF versus SD cards. Does it matter which one you use? No, it doesn't matter which one you use. I know a lot of cameras like my D800 come with both slots. It does not matter which one you use. Sometimes I grab a CF card, throw it in, and it works. Sometimes I grab an SD card, throw it in, and guess what? It works. The only time that it does matter is for speed as far as writing the file. So if you're shooting a lot of images in quick sequence, like you're running out of buffer, sometimes a faster card will help that. Or if you're shooting the high quality video, you could be able to shoot for a longer time, or you won't have any write issues there. But also offloading. I have definitely noticed a difference when I'm using some newer cards that I have in offloading time when utilizing those newer ones and copying them over to one of my drives on the computer. That is a huge thing, especially when I'm using one of my USB 3 card readers, and so that it definitely makes a big difference. If you're just offloading a couple of images, it's probably not a big deal, but a big shoot or a lot of video footage, that kind of thing, you will notice a big difference with the newer cards that write and also read a lot faster. So that's the big difference in between the two, whether you're using the CF or the SD. Rolf asks, I'm still confused regarding setting camera to aperture or shutter priority when bracketing. Will you please advise? Well, it depends on what you're doing. Just like everything in photography, it depends. If you are going to be shooting something where the depth of field matters and you don't want to vary that depth of field, then obviously you're going to want to stick with the aperture priority. Personally, most of the time when I'm using a bracketing, it's going to be in a scenic landscape kind of a situation. And so I definitely want to stay on that aperture priority, and the shutter speed probably isn't going to matter unless there's a lot of wind. And in that case, bracketing might not, at least if you're bracketing to merge the photos in an HDR kind of a situation, then the leaves, that kind of thing, are going to be moving. It might be a little bit harder to get them to match up. So that's something you need to take into consideration. But most of the time, I will use an aperture priority because I want that fixed depth of field. I don't want that depth of field to change when that bracket is running. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a time when you would want to use a shutter priority for a bracket. I'm sure someone probably has an answer for that if you do, but a lot of other people will. I think you can use ISO to make it work also for your bracket. I need to check on that. That might be a body by body thing. So, but for the most part, again, I just stick with varying the shutter, and it works out fine. Personally, I don't use shutter priority for hardly anything. Even if I'm shooting sports, which is the one time a lot of people might want to use it, I prefer to use aperture priority. I think it ends up with a better end result, and I prefer to keep that shallow depth of field for a lot of my images, and it's just the way that I prefer to shoot. So to each his own, of course, but try out both ways, see which one works out better for you. Martin asks, what alternatives are there to Lightroom? If I was to switch from Lightroom to another product, which as of right now, I cannot live without Lightroom. I love it. The only one that I would probably switch to would be Capture One Pro. Although I haven't touched it in years, I used to use it a lot. Now I probably haven't touched it in probably 6-7 years, something like that. It's made by Phase One, so it's an excellent product. They have great engineers. They have people that really know what they're doing. But I've heard and I've read that their workflow management isn't that great inside of Capture One Pro, at least, or their archive when you have a lot of images in there. Don't know if that's the case. It's just something I happen to read somewhere. So if you're thinking about an alternative to it, go check that out. It's on Phase One's website. Put a link up to it. Really is an excellent product, and a product that's been around for a long time and supported by a great company as well. So that'll make a difference. Two other ones that are out there, Light Zone and Dark Table, are ones that I've heard of in the past. I'm sure there's a ton of other ones that are out there. Some of them even work on Linux products, which you can utilize. I'm not I don't use a Linux machine as my primary machine, so it's not something that I do. I use them as servers. But to each his own. If you like a product, great. It gives you the results that you want. That's what matters. I'm happy with Lightroom. I'm happy with the workflow. Although, as I've always said, there's things that I want to see improved, and hopefully somehow one of my videos made it to Adobe this year. And so we'll see if any of those things get picked up and put into the newer version for 2016. We will see. Only time will tell on that. But yeah, there's a couple. And here's also a link on Have Camera Will Travel that will give you a bunch of other alternatives as far as raw processing. And the big thing I like about Lightroom, though, is the fact that you could use it as a single archive, see everything, find everything, search. In that realm, I don't think you're going to find a better product especially at that price point. It's just impossible to make that work inside of that super low, what is it, $150 price. Maybe able to get it on sale where you just pay, $9.99 a month for the photography deal, includes Photoshop. You're not going to find a better deal than that for pretty much any decent app. Obviously, you're going to find other apps that are open source, that kind of thing, that'll be okay. But for such a product that's been around for so long, then it's worth it. A lot of people say, yeah, Lightroom's slow. Even if I have a low number of images, you have a low number of images and Lightroom's slow, it's probably time to upgrade your drives, upgrade your computer. If you have less than 5,000-10,000 images and you're telling me that your catalog is slow, you probably need to start looking at your hardware and the computer that are running, or the operating system itself. Maybe it's time to just reformat that whole machine because you have other issues and other things that are going on. So that's some little tips there. So I think that's it for today's show. Questions, of course, always looking for them for the show. Of course, tweet them to me, post them on Facebook, post them on YouTube, whatever, wherever. I'll do my best to answer them and put them on the show. I think that's it. So thanks, guys. Keep shooting.